I'm just going to highlight a few things and give you some examples of a few things. But don't think because I don't discuss something that I agree with it, I don't. I'm counting on you to look at the evidence and use your common sense, okay? Let's go in reverse. The chart they put up of all these other people, first of all, I think that they want us to be here for 8 weeks instead of 3. But you know what? Todd McNair put on his evidence, and if he was wrong about any of that, they should have called some of these people that they have implied to use to speculate that maybe they would have disagreed with Todd. That's up to them if they want to prove that Todd said something that wasn't accurate. You know why they didn't call any of those people? Because everything that Todd told you was the truth. It's that simple. Number 2, nobody called Broillet, did they? So he implied that we should have called Broillet to the witness stand. I'm sorry. Broillet is their star witness. If they wanted to prove that what my star witness said was not true, they should have brought Broillet in here. But they didn't. You know why? Because nobody believes Broillet. I'm not going to put somebody on the witness stand that I know does not tell the truth and has made stuff up about people anywhere from Todd McNair to Pete Carroll to whatever happened at the Marshall Falk party. I'm not putting that kind of testimony on the witness stand. If they wanted to, they should have. They didn't because nobody believes it. And they did. So don't start speculating into what witnesses that didn't come here would say. Focus on the witnesses that were here. I will tie my star to Todd McNair anytime. Okay, next. I'm going to cross things off as I go through them, okay? One more thing. What did any of those people tell us about the phone call anyway? There were only 2 people on the phone. Then he says the NCAA has taken responsibility. Malarkey. They get up there and they say, we take responsibility where mistakes were made, and some guy didn't get his promotion, and then they tell you to go down and answer a bunch of no's and send them home without any responsibility. What kind of accepting responsibility for your own actions is that? Wrong. Then they said, well, Mr. Broillet just wants you to pluck a number out of the air for human damages. And then he puts up a couple of pieces of the testimony, and that wasn't all of it, that Todd had to say about what this has done to him personally, okay? But I'll tell you what. What doesn't appear in the record is what you all saw that day when he could not catch his breath to speak. I've been a lawyer for many years. I've been in many courtrooms. And that was one of the most memorable moments I have ever been in, because if there is one thing that tells you what this has done to this man, his reputation, his emotions, and his life, it's what happened in the courtroom that day. Words are fine, but you felt it. We all did. And then they say, well, coaches can get, even our experts said coaches that get an unethical conduct finding can get a job coaching again. Coaching. Yes. Todd McNair will be coaching in September. He will be coaching again, but not at a Power 5 school. Yesterday you heard Ms. Ollendorf of the University of Texas say that the University of Texas football program has never hired a coach with an unethical conduct finding, period. You heard from Greg Sankey. Yes, Todd McNair has not applied to the SEC, but what Greg Sankey was telling you is that the major conferences do not like the idea of bringing in people with these kinds of findings. And by the way, not every finding is the same. What made the difference here is it tied Todd McNair to Reggie Bush's scandal. And that's the difference. And that's why his own school, Temple, would not take it. And forget about this stuff about way back when this happened. Mr. Thompson puts out a press release about a career ending. Todd didn't just try to end his career. He made multiple efforts to get jobs. Remember, it's a window. Once a year, the window opens up right after January into early February, because that's when the coaching carousel happens. So in 13, he thought he had something lined up in Arizona. Arizona's coach wanted him, called him and said, get the guys together, we're putting the team together here. And then management would not take him. A year later, the coaching carousel, Matt Rule comes in at Temple, his alma mater, where he was a hero. Matt Rule calls him, says, come on, you're going to be my running backs coach, let's get it going. And administration says no. It's like a window of opportunity, and when the chairs stop in the game of musical chairs, everybody sits down, and if you don't have a chair to sit in, you're out of luck until the next year comes along. It's the cycle he told you about. Moreover, you just don't, Todd McNairs of the world do not send out resumes. They have connections, they play football with people, they were coached by people, they know people, people want them, people ask for them, and that's the way it used to be. Pete Carroll asked for him to interview with Pete Carroll, and Pete Carroll was on top of the football world, and now he can't even get an interview with his old friend Steve Sarkisian at the University of Washington. He didn't just lay down. He didn't treat it as career ending. He wanted to coach football again. He'll be doing it this fall, and you saw the emotion on the stand about how much not being in coaching has killed him. And then we heard, well, where's the evidence that the penalties were increased because of the finding against Todd McNair? They're never going to admit it. The evidence is that before they found against Todd McNair in the defer letter on February 24th, the penalties were 6 scholarships, 1-year bowl ban. There was nothing about TV bans. Now, if they had changed that to 8 scholarships over 2 years instead of 6, if they made that kind of change, I'd say, yeah, I could see that coming out in the wash somewhere along the line. But to take a 6 scholarship ban and turn it into a 30 scholarship ban, and a 2-year postseason, 1-year postseason bowl ban, and turn it into a 2-year postseason bowl ban with all the money involved in that, to ratchet it up, to take it from something here and to send it up to there, they had to get one of the coaches knowing about what happened. Otherwise, USC would have said, are you kidding me? Because we didn't have enough compliance officers, you're doing this to our program and to our kids at USC? Are you kidding me? They needed Todd McNair to make this happen. You know, I grew up in Texas. You remember El Paso? I think I told you all that. That's why I say y'all. Still hangs around with you. Remember, there was a saying in Texas that when you're walking along and you see a turtle on top of a fence post, it didn't get there on its own. Okay? Same thing here. You've seen the evidence. They'll never admit it because they know the consequence of admitting it. You'll have to accept from the evidence what happened because you know which way to look. Interestingly, I had that clip from when I deposed Thomas back in 2012, and in that clip, he says you couldn't have had the kind of penalties against USC without the finding against McNair. And his answer to that is, well, Thomas amended his deposition. Wasn't that nice? He gives sworn testimony in 2012, and now he's just going to amend the deposition because it doesn't feel good that you needed McNair to get up to these kinds of penalties. You don't just amend the depositions, and don't tell me about the TV ban because the TV ban wasn't in the original penalties. Before they got an employee and coach of USC with knowledge, and that's why they stuck in with knowledge of something he had no knowledge of. Until they had that, they couldn't produce these kinds of penalties, and we all know. And by the way, that was their motivation. you know, I don't have to prove that they committed a conspiracy. He got up and said, I have to prove a conspiracy. No, I don't. All I'm proving is that they violated their own rules, that they violated them repeatedly, that because they violated their rules, interlopers got involved, observers that were not supposed to be involved in this process, and they hijacked the committee, and they persuaded those people, and there's no other reason behind it than those people. Uphaw, Howard, Cooper, and of course, Paul D. and Patuto. And by the way, Patuto, I don't mind that she was watching HBO Real Sports. That's fine with me. If one of you had watched a year ago something about the Todd McNair case, that would be fine with us, but you'd have to take yourself off the jury. Okay. Her error, and I don't know that it was really accidental, is she had formed an opinion already about this guy Lake that she brought to the committee. She never should have gone onto the committee. And Shep Cooper should have known that because he had the same opinion and had that email exchange with her. That's the Patuto story. Almost there. The two sources in that article. You know the article from 2006 or whatever, two sources? Well, we know who they are. It's Lake and his partner, Michael Michaels. That's two sources. Not only that, but if you look at the article says the two sources are accusing Carroll of covering things up, that Pete Carroll, the head coach, was covering things up. It's malarkey. This was a sensationalized story by those two sources because they were trying to bring pressure on Reggie Bush to give them back their money. That's all that is. And even in the face of those articles, Todd McNair did both of his interviews after that article about the two sources and the 8-month investigation. He did both of his interviews without bringing a lawyer. Why? Because he knew that that was all a bunch of malarkey. And I think he was stunned when Joe Hanigmeyer in the middle of the second interview said, you know, we're going to have to bring unethical charges against you. If you read what happened there, you'll see that the USC representative looks at Joe Hanigmeyer and says, are you kidding me? You're bringing unethical charges against Todd McNair because of what ex-con convicted felon blah, blah, blah guy said? Then he says it doesn't make common sense that the agent meeting would happen because the guy was going into jail in 18 days or 10 days, but he had a partner. So if he could get onto the agent list, his partner could take over while he was off in jail. Don't tell me that that doesn't make sense. Everything that you said has made common sense. Then he puts up some quotations. You know the quotations about Lake said this, Lake said that, and blah, blah. Those quotations were from San Diego. And the whole San Diego thing went nowhere because there were a bunch of witnesses about San Diego and the Marshall Falk Party. And the NCAA committee just said, you know, we can't come down with anything on San Diego because it's all so conflicted. So the stuff that he put up there, these little quotes, you know, if you look at the interviews, if you choose to do that, you'll see that the mention of being in the locker room, now that one sounds like, oh my goodness, Lake was in the locker room. But if you look at it, Lake says, I didn't see McNair in the locker room. So what does that have to do with anything? And then another time in San Diego, he's being asked about whether or not he told McNair about hitting Bush, and he kind of goes back and forth and around and then says, I think I did, I might have, I'm not sure, maybe I did, I'm not. It's a choppy interview that they tried to turn into something it was not. Then the 3 calls to Ornstein in a short period of time on December 27, 2004, that's when Reggie Bush was working at Ornstein. So he was probably trying to reach Reggie Bush by calling Ornstein's office. And then I didn't say that Lake was drinking or drugged or in some party. What I said was they never asked those questions. The investigators that questioned Lake never asked him anything about whether he was drinking or drugged or at a loud party at all in the interview. They got the information that they thought was kind of interesting and then just dropped it and did not test it. Then they implied that the fact that they don't have subpoena power, that they don't have court process power and everything, as Eleanor Myers said, that they do the best with what they've got. You know, if what they've got is not good enough to defame somebody, then they can't defame somebody just because this is the best that they can get. If they can't get clear evidence that satisfies that standard of proof down there, if they can't do that, tough. You can't defame somebody just telling us, well, and this is the best we could get, so we decided to say it. Can't do it. Doesn't work. It's got to be the kind of evidence that reasonable people rely on in the conduct of serious affairs. Then they put something up that said McNair lied about the fault party, you know, as if it was just some general lie. It was about who he went to the party with, and that's all. And then he cleared it up before the hearing, and all of that was admitted to on the witness stand by everybody. It was all cleared up. It was nothing about lying about whether he was late or lying about whether he knew about agency agreements and benefits. None of that. And then I want to talk for just a moment about damages. If we can put up the 5th slide, the Formosa slide. I'll tell you a witness who did not come, and why you can rely on Dr. Formosa. Dr. Formosa was asked by defense counsel, now you did review Coach McNair's testimony, but you haven't reviewed the testimony of any other witnesses, correct? And look at what his answer was. The only one of your sports experts that was sent to me, his deposition, I read that. They have an expert in the economic lawsuits that they did not. And he read the deposition of that expert, and it tells me when they didn't bring their expert, it tells me that our expert must have been pretty much right on, or else they would have disputed it.
Your Honor, I asked that the jury be reminded of who has the burden of proof in this case.
Oh, I'm taking the burden of proof. I put on my expert. And he laid out all the reasons conservatively, and then he read their expert's depo, and they never even put on their expert. Why? Because our numbers are conservative and made sense. That's the only way you can interpret that. If there was a dispute, they would have challenged what our expert had to say. Okay. I've got about 3 minutes as I'm counting the numbers, so hang in there with me. Okay. Everything else that I jotted down, I think you all can figure out because you sat and listened to the evidence. You've been very attentive. You've been very attentive all day long, and you just have yapped on. Okay? One thing I want you to remember. What you do in this case will have consequence. Consequence for Todd McNair and consequence far beyond. Said that elections have consequences. Oh, believe me, jury verdicts have consequences. And when you go into the voting booth, you're one of 100 million that are casting your vote. When you do this, you are one of 12. You act with duty and with honor, with respect for what you're doing. You will always be known as Todd McNair's jury. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen.